All right, team, welcome to another episode of the Exceptional Leadership Podcast. Bit of a specialised one for you guys today. We're going to talk about leadership in the entrepreneurial space. I have had some feedback from some listeners saying that they'd like to hear me talk about the entrepreneurial journey and the sort of unique leadership struggles that come in that space. And it's actually very applicable and relevant to this podcast because when you're starting your own business, you do need to demonstrate leadership, but it's unique in the sense that it's not in any one particular area. When you're an entrepreneur, you need to lead in every single facet that exists in business, whether it's people leadership, whether it's financial leadership, marketing, business development, so on and so forth. So there's a lot that goes into this process of starting and growing your own business, and it will test your ability to lead in a way that nothing else in the business world can, because you have to be across every single component of business. It makes it very satisfying when you have it come off and you grow something into a successful institution, but it's also incredibly hard work along the way. So I know our entrepreneurs need a little bit of encouragement every now and then, so hopefully this podcast either lights a fire underneath you to start doing something that you've always wanted to do, or maybe it'll provide a little bit of fuel for those who are already on that journey and are looking for a little bit of guidance and encouragement. But as we always do, let's get started with a real-world example of an entrepreneur who started off in his garage and turned his business into something that I think we can all agree was pretty successful. That company is Amazon, and the gentleman I'm talking about is Jeff Bezos. So let's get into it. Here we go. In 1994, a young entrepreneur named Jeff Bezos had an idea that seemed almost too simple to be groundbreaking. He noticed that the internet was rapidly growing, and with it, an opportunity to revolutionize how people bought products. At the time, brick and mortar stores were the primary way that people accessed books, but Bezos saw a gap in the market that needed to be filled. What if there was a way to buy books from the comfort of your own home? And what if you could access an endless selection of books without ever having to step into a store? Driven by this idea, Bezos took a leap of faith. He left his job on Wall Street, moved to Seattle, and set up shop in his garage. With little more than a computer and a vision, Bezos began building what would soon become Amazon, an online bookstore that, at first glance, seemed like a modest venture. But he had bigger plans than just selling books. As Amazon's website took shape, Bezos worked tirelessly, often managing orders himself. The company was still in its infancy, operating with just a handful of employees and a focus on books. But he always had an eye for the future. He didn't just want to sell books. He wanted to create a marketplace where anything could be bought online. He saw beyond the scope of traditional e-commerce, envisioning a world where customers could shop for a vast range of products without even leaving their own homes. In 1998, just 4 years after its humble beginning, Amazon made its first big leap. It expanded its catalogue beyond books, introducing music, DVDs, and electronics into its growing platform. Bezos' bold move paid off as Amazon quickly gained traction, attracting millions of customers who were drawn to the ease of shopping from their own homes. But he wasn't just content to rest on his laurels. He kept pushing the boundaries of what Amazon could do. And in 2005, he introduced Amazon Prime, a subscription service that offered free shipping, revolutionizing the way people thought about online shopping. And then came Amazon Web Services, or AWS, a cloud computing service that transformed Amazon into a tech giant, not just an e-commerce platform. And in the years that followed, Bezos introduced Alexa and expanded into entertainment, further solidifying Amazon's dominance in every corner of modern life. By the time Amazon was a global powerhouse, it was no longer just an online store. It was a tech empire, changing the way people lived, worked, and shopped. Bezos had turned his small, simple idea of an online bookstore into a massive, world-altering business. His vision, determination, and willingness to innovate had turned Amazon into one of the most influential companies in history. And what began in a garage had grown into a global giant that would reshape industries for years to come. Now, there are many stories like that. Some of them, many of them, most of them even, not on the scale that Amazon and companies like Tesla are on in terms of what they became. But many successful businesses started just like that, just somebody having an idea and starting it up with very humble beginnings from their own homes, from out of their own garages. You've got to start somewhere, and it's not always going to be with your own dedicated building and set of staff and whatnot. It's logical that you start small, see if it's viable, and then turn it into something big as interest grows and as you work out exactly where you fit in the grand scheme of things. So this podcast is going to be a little more lengthy than the normal ones, and that's purely because we have a heck of a lot of detail that we need to get through if I'm going to address all the issues that you guys need to be aware of if you are looking to start your own business and make it a successful one. I just want to start off by saying that the difficulty that is going to come your way if you want to do this properly cannot be exaggerated. You know, most of us don't have the luxury of devoting 7 days a week to starting a new business while having the absence of any other responsibilities. You might have kids, you might have a wife or husband or partner, you might have, actually you're very likely to have, a full-time job because you've got to keep the lights on and pay off the mortgage whilst you start this passion project that you hope to turn into something successful on the side. So most of us are going to be doing a second job, which is this business venture of our own. We'll be doing a second job while we're already working full-time, while we're already dealing with all of life's normal responsibilities. And that's going to bring with it, obviously, some limitations that we're going to have to find ways to work around. And the only way to work around those, in the absence of being able to resign from your full-time job and free up time that way, the only way to deal with it is to deal with all your responsibilities during your normal 9 to 5 hours and then put in the extra work on your business after hours and on weekends. And that's the reality. There's no shortcut for this. Very, very rarely, if ever, do things just fall into your lap and realize themselves without you having to do some really, really hard work and hard thinking. So even if you do follow the steps that I'm going to give you today, which will outline a good plan as to how you can have the best chance of being successful in starting your own business, I want you to understand that you are still going to have to work your tail off and really grind, probably for a significant period of time, and in the face of few, if any, results for the vast majority of that time before you find success. So don't underestimate how difficult this is going to be. If you speak to entrepreneurs, really successful business owners, they will quite often communicate something in common to you, and that is that the first 12 months of any business is really, really difficult. You know, you've got no customers, your name isn't out there, no one knows who you are, you've got no regular, reliable cash flow coming in, so the financial struggles are real in that first 12 months. And really, it's about staying afloat as best you can while building a presence in your chosen marketplace. We'll go over that in a little bit more detail, but that's just some context that I wanted to start off. So there's going to be a lot of detail in this podcast. It's going to be a little longer than usual. You might have to have a couple of listens to take some notes and go over some things that I cover here to make sure you've got it all down. And you will hear me flicking through some pages as well, because I myself have had to write multiple notes on this topic so that I can communicate this all to you guys in a manner that seems logical, and coherent. So let's get started. All right. Firstly, before you start your business and going into it knowing that it's going to be a very, very difficult and unrewarding first 12 months, once you've reconciled with that, once you've reconciled with the fact that you are going to be putting in a lot of extra hours above and beyond your everyday responsibilities, you need to have a plan. I said things don't fall into your lap, all right? It's exactly the same with business, more so with starting a venture. So we need to have a really good idea as to the contextual background of our business, i.e., what's the context, what's the gap in the market that we're trying to fill, what's the need, what do we exist for? When people say, what do you exist for, what do you do, what's your answer? And are there a million other people trying to do exactly what you're proposing that you do? Where's your gap? Where's your niche? You can also call that value proposition. They go hand in hand. Contextual background and value proposition. The context of your business feeds into the value proposition. Why are you here? What do you do? What gap are you filling? Now, to help you work that out, you've probably worked out by now that I'm a big fan of plans and structure and strategy. What I want you to do is think about something called context mapping and all the considerations that are going to come under that context mapping. So what I want you to do is, on an Excel spreadsheet, I want you to create a table, and I want you to have some different headings in that table that are going to lay things out really nicely for you, okay, as a part of our context mapping process. So it's a useful tool, and it's going to make apparent to you the external forces that you might come up against when you're setting up your business. Having a good understanding of those external forces gives you a good chance to develop a plan to address them. So we want to identify them and catalogue them. So we might need to consider things like the demographic trends that affect our business. Who are we going after? What is our target market? What's the demographic? What do they like? What do they not like? That's going to feed into how we position our business, our service offering, and our products. What are the rules and the regulations that we have to operate under with our business? You might be doing something relatively simple in terms of the business idea, and you don't really have to worry about rules and regulations too much potentially. But even on the most basic level, you'll have to, if you start making enough revenue, you'll have to be aware of how to structure your business from a tax efficiency perspective. So that's an example of something at a very basic level that all of us as business owners, once we start making some money, will have to be aware of at the most basic level. What's the economy and the environmental factors? What's that looking like? Now, all over the world over the last few years, cost of living has been incredibly expensive. No different here in Australia. But how does the economy and the environment impact the viability of your product that you're offering? Can people afford it? Can you afford it? Are you going to have to seek financing from an institution to get your business off the ground and set it up for that first 12 months, or are you going to pay for it out of your own savings? Why is that important? Because economy and environmental factors impact your ability to secure loans. In high interest rate environments, banks are less willing to loan out money. So you need to be aware of the environment you're operating in and how much cash, for example, your business needs to get a head start. You need to work out how you're going to fill that gap and address that issue. Then we've got the topic of competition. This is a really big one. How many other people in your space are trying to do exactly what you're doing? You need to be very, very clear on the value proposition that you're offering and who else is trying to do exactly the same thing. What's your point of difference? Very, very important, because if you start a business and it turns out that, there's 1,000 different people just in your local area that are trying to do exactly the same thing, automatically you've got your job cut out for you in a way that would be way more difficult than if you could play in a less competitive space. So understand that. Then you've got things like technology trends. How could you harness technology to streamline your processes, your management processes, your business processes within your organization? You know, some things make the job a lot easier, accounting software, management software, so on and so forth. And then we want to have a look at trends, market trends. So your company, is there a need for the product that you're offering? What has indicated to you that you should get involved in this business? Does it go above and beyond a passion? Or have you actually been able to identify trends in the market that suggest what you're offering might mean you can run a viable company? This is all very, very important stuff to consider. And finally, what are the uncertainties? Do you have any big uncertainties that you can think of? Will they have a big impact on your business? You know, now, I guess to give you an example, a classic uncertainty that all of us will have to navigate when we start up a business is your ability to secure business. You know, can you secure a sufficient number of clients to ensure the business remains viable? That's often the largest uncertainty, but I want you to think about all the other things that might constitute uncertainty in the landscape that you are attempting to navigate. And by now, you're probably starting to see why I said you'll have to start up an Excel spreadsheet. There's a lot of things to consider, all right? So I want you to write down all of those categories, and I want you to fill out underneath those categories with as much information as you can. It's good to have it all on a piece of paper or a screen so that you can come back to it later and you have some semblance of a plan. All right, so now let's get into value proposition. We just covered this briefly. We skimmed over it, but I want to talk about it specifically and the considerations that are going to come under that value proposition topic. So I want to use the value proposition, let's call it a canvas. Again, this could just be a simple Excel spreadsheet. We're going to use it as an anchor point to orient ourselves during the first 12 months, especially the first 12 months of our business, while we're trying to establish a market presence. And you'll notice that it complements the context mapping that we just discussed. It goes hand in hand. And it does that by showing what I like to call pain points that might result for customers and other people that are going to interact, hopefully, with your business. And if we know the demographic trends and the economics at play and the pain points, that means we can better service those customers. We can better position our business to address those issues. All right. So there's a few things on that topic that I want to consider. The first is target clients. Who's your target demographic? Who are you after? You know, maybe you've got a wedding business. Maybe you make things, okay, that people can decorate their tables with at weddings. Your target demographic for that is likely to be female, and it's likely to be within a specific age group. And this will require some research on your part. But let's say weddings is your target market, female is what you're zeroing in on. Your target market in terms of age group is probably going to be 18 to really any age, but I'd say if you want to get super specific, say 18 to 40. And once you know that, you can gear your product offering and your marketing strategies towards people that fit that bill. And then you've got to think about your marketing and your network strategies. What is that going to look like? And oftentimes, I think one of the best ways to get started from a marketing perspective, and it's especially good because it's financially achievable, is just simple networking. Getting yourself and your company, your business, out there. Word of mouth. Word of mouth is really, really good advertising. Okay, we tend to trust it. So talking to people about your business, when they show interest, showing them the things that you offer, the space that you operate in, having a bit of a pitch ready to go so that you give a consistent and concise message. It all forms a part of that value proposition that we spoke about. Networking can take the form of, well, it can take many different forms. It could be you're at your job and someone says, tell me a little bit more about you. And you tell them a bit about you, and you also raise the subject of the business that you run on the side. And oftentimes people are very curious to find out about what it is you actually do outside of your 9 to 5. So don't be shy in promoting yourself on a one-to-one level like that. It doesn't have to be cringy. Okay? It doesn't have to feel like a marketing ploy or a sales pitch. It can just be something that you raise in general conversation. Be honest. This is what I do. And you'll find that the more people you talk to, the more grassroots interactions you will get, because people are curious. That guy that I work with happens to run a woodworking business on the side. Interesting. Let's jump in. Let's have a look at his social media presence. Let's have a look at his website. I'm curious. It's effective because people know you. When they know you, when they feel like they have a connection with you, they're more curious to invest their time in exploring what it is you actually do. And actually, because they have that connection with you, they're more likely to tell other people as well. So networking is a very effective way, even on a one-to-one level, to communicate your value proposition to people. Let's broaden it out a little bit. Let's get a bit more strategic about it. That's the very grassroots level of our networking strategy, right? Is to talk to individuals that we interact with on a day-to-day basis, to get ourselves out there. But how do we expand that? Well, if you're looking at things like weddings as the example business that we're going to use for our analytical purposes here, you might want to start going to wedding conferences. You know, those big shows that they have at convention centers where it's essentially a gathering of all things wedding related from a business perspective, and people will set up stalls to show off their products. If you make things that you might decorate tables with, for example, at weddings, you might have the ability to secure a stall at an event like that and show off your wares and your goods and advertise your business that way to a larger audience. You know, and the thing that I've really realized with business, starting a small business, is that it does really pay to be personable, and it does pay to be a bit of an extrovert. And this is what I meant at the top of the show when I said it's going to challenge you in ways that you couldn't have imagined. When I said that you're going to have to lead in all these different areas. You're going to have to be everything to the business: the marketer, the manager, the design consultant, everything. It definitely helps, given how personable you have to be to get your business out there, to develop those people skills, to get good at talking to people, to clarify your message so that you give consistent information about your business in a short amount of time to everybody that shows interest. So again, still focusing on the value proposition strategy. We then need to work out above and beyond our networking, which is marketing in itself. But once we've thought about networking, you know, talking to people individually, going to trade shows, getting our product out there in a networking perspective, we need to think about what our broader marketing strategy is. Are you going to advertise on social media? Are you going to have a Patreon page? Are you going to start an Instagram page? What about Facebook? Maybe you'll start your own website, although I'd argue that there's probably not really a need for that, given the prevalence of social media these days. You don't really need your own website often. But we need to think about that. All right, so to cover off, we've spoken about our target clients. Our value proposition and what fits under that. It's our target clients. What are we offering and to who? Then we delved into our marketing and networking strategies and some things that we could look at. And just to cover off on the marketing strategies, you can pay for advertising on Facebook and social media sites, or you can just post and let the algorithm do its work on those social media services. It's up to you. But oftentimes, you will have to pay for advertising in one way or another. Maybe it is to secure that booth at a trade show. That will come at a cost. But it might be a worthwhile investment to get your business out there and into the social conscience. All right, so let's also delve into the type of products that we're offering. Now, this is a bit of a tricky one to cover because the types of businesses that you guys might have in mind could vary extensively. So I'm going to try and keep this fairly broad and overarching, but understand that we could go a million different directions depending on your business. But I want to talk about product offering. Oftentimes, there's a sweet spot between too much diversification and just enough choice. It's easier for you to make a smaller number of products or offer a smaller number of services than it is to offer 10 to 15 different services. All right, so what you might want to do is be very specific about the need that you and your business exist to fill. And you might want to focus on a niche. And that tells the market exactly what you exist to do. But it also gives you the security of being able to streamline your processes and systems around the development of those things. Let's use a woodworking example. You might have fridge magnets, wedding props, cheese boards, coasters, anything that you can make out of wood. Ideally, you want to offer something that takes you little to no time to make in vast quantities so you can pump them out fast, but that also give you the best return on the time you've invested. So that's an example of what I'm talking about when I say streamline your product offering. Have a very, very hard think about what it's going to cost you to deliver that service and tailor your business accordingly. You don't want to get caught out diversifying too much. You cannot be everything to everyone. So pick your niche and identify how you can meet that demand. Then you might have, let's get into the nitty-gritty here. Okay, I said this was going to be detailed. You might have more of a relationship-based business, not a product-based business necessarily, but maybe it's a service-based business where you're interacting with people and offering them services that are more relationship-based. So you might have different tiers of service offering that come with a different level of engagement from you and your people, and obviously a different price tag. You could have a platinum service offering, a gold service offering, silver service offering, and bronze service offering. So what that's going to look like essentially is 4 different packages of service offering. Now this is very applicable to something like a consulting service, for example. All right. So have a very good think, depending on the nature of your business, the sorts of packages and service offerings that you're going to offer, and work out if that works for you and the time that you have to commit to it. Another thing just before we cover off on this, you will find that you have best sellers and you'll find that you have other products that don't really capture the market's imagination. Probably 20% of your service offerings or products will capture about 80% of your revenue. It's perfectly okay to do away with those products once you have that information that aren't really bringing in the dollars or aren't really attracting the market, that aren't appealing to the market. What's the point, in keeping 80% of the products if they're not bringing in significant revenue? It's better just to double down and focus on the 20% of your products and your service offerings that are bringing in 80% of your revenue. So have a think about that. I want to also talk a little bit about the systems and the processes that we're going to use to run our business. And again, I know this is a lot of information for you guys, and this is why I said you'll have to take notes, but this is all crucial stuff to think about before you even start your business. We're just in the planning phase right now, all right? We're thinking about all these things I've spoken about from the beginning of the podcast right up until now as they're planning items. So we haven't even made our first product yet. We haven't even shipped our first product yet. We're still in the planning, note-taking phase. We're still in the strategy design phase. And part of that is understanding the systems, processes, and templates that you're going to use to run your business. Again, this varies depending on the business that you are trying to run, but I'm going to simplify things by using the woodworking and wedding style example. So what are your systems? Okay, if you're making something, for example, that is going to sit on a table at a wedding, we need to make sure that we've got all the right tools and whatnot to create that piece. And ideally, we should have our systems and processes streamlined to create maximum efficiency in the process of making that product. Ideally, it should be set up in a way where we have really good quality tools, really good quality processes and systems to make lots of those things quickly and to a really good level of quality. Because when a set of orders comes through and you've only got, a Saturday night to fulfill it and make it, which is quite possible as a small business owner, you want to make sure that when you go into your garage or your shed to make this stuff, you can hit the ground running and you can pump out a bunch of these things in really, really good time with a beautiful level of quality every single time with minimal effort on your part. So this is where, this isn't just stuff that's considered at a small business level. If you go to companies like Amazon, if you go to companies like anything warehousing, anything freight, anything logistics, these guys have their processes continually refined. It's fine-tuned to the point where there are no inefficiencies. All right? If you walk into an Amazon warehouse, you will find that absolutely everything is systemic and planned to the most minute detail to save time, boost efficiencies, and reduce costs. And it should be no different at your level. Right? You can set things up in your shed or in your garage so that the pieces of equipment that you need to use to construct what it is you're constructing are all lined up in the right order, for example, that you have to use them. Maybe it means having crucial tools within easy reach so that you're not having to fish around for tools and waste time. Maybe it means having all the things that you're likely to need in the construction of this table piece for this wedding in easy reach, in an organized, catalogued manner. I want you to think systems and I want you to think processes to eliminate wasted time. And I'm a big fan of a really tidy, logically organized workspace for this reason. This is just one example. Obviously, manufacturing. I realize there's a lot of businesses that don't rely on tools and things like that. But even if we get down to the software level, You might think about, okay, well, let's say I'm a service-based business. Maybe I'm a consulting firm. Okay, how do you manage your invoicing? You know, are you filling out pieces of paper by hand and, you know, submitting paper invoices to people and scanning them in and then emailing them? I certainly hope not. You need to use a proper invoicing software and accounting software. I think one of them is called Xerox. I might have that wrong. Don't quote me on that one. I think there are some pieces of accounting software that make all that stuff very, very useful. Okay, when we talk about software, yes, there's going to be a subscription fee, but very, very useful to eliminate those inefficiencies and reduce the amount of work that you need to do. So think about online systems to automate that process and ensure that your billing process is executed really smoothly. There's another, actually here it is, in my notes, I've just found a reference to a system that apparently has some very good reviews. It's called Zoho, Z-O-H-O. Apparently it's the system of choice, specifically for businesses like consultancy. So that'll make your tax time a heck of a lot easier because you've got all this stuff electronically stored in an organized fashion. It'll make sure that you get paid as quickly as possible because you'll get your invoices out efficiently. And that's exactly what we need to do from an efficiency and organization perspective. All right, and finally, we need to think about not only our financial and legal considerations, but our ethical considerations as well when it comes to running a business. Financial considerations that I really want you to think carefully about are how on earth are you going to get through the first 12 months with no money coming in? Because that's probably going to be the situation you're facing. Most businesses make hardly any money at all for the first 12 months. So what I'd suggest to you is that you either don't take a loan and you have the required amount of money to pay the bills and keep the lights on saved up in your bank account before you try and execute this venture, i.e. enough money to get you through the first 12 months while you build that customer base. Or you choose a business model that is so low cost that it's not really something you need to be concerned about. You know, and perhaps the wedding business is a good example of something that works like that. You know, you don't have to go and buy materials in advance until you get the order. You will have to make a small upfront investment in tools, of course, but maybe you're someone that does trades for a living anyway, and you've already got all that stuff. So think about that. What's it going to cost me? What am I going to have to outlay monetary-wise to get this business off the ground? I want you to think very carefully about your costs. Are you renting an office space? Are you renting a workshop? Factor all that in. Work out what it's going to cost over 12 months. All right, what's my initial outlay going to have to be for tools? Do I have to hire anyone, or am I going to do this myself? And this is why people start, like Amazon, out of their garage, because you don't have to rent the space. You already own it or are paying it off as a part of a normal mortgage or rental outgoing, so it's not an additional cost consideration. And all your power and utility bills are obviously factored into that as well. So this is why people start out of their own garages or their living rooms. It's to keep these costs down. All right, legal. Now, you might not have thought about this one. I'm not going to go too deep into this because you guys are probably experiencing information overload already. But just recognize that obviously as small business owners, we're not legal or accounting professionals. So we're going to need to look to seek advice with respect to how, you know, we should structure our business, for example. How do we run and operate it within the law? So specifically, legal and accounting assistance is what I am getting at here, specifically accounting. you might go, why? Why is this important? Well, we want to make sure that we understand how to structure the organisation if we want to register it as a corporation, if we want to insure ourselves against financial liability, and of course for tax efficiency purposes. So I want to give you an example. A gym owner. Let's say you're a martial arts gym owner. Now, most students will have to sign a waiver before they become a member of a martial arts gym, because just like any contact sport, there's a risk of incurring an injury. And as a gym owner, you don't want those students, having a freak accident and they're coming back and suing you, right? Because they hurt themselves while on your premises. So if you run a business where people are likely, or there's a possibility that people could get hurt while they're a client of yours, you need to have a really, really good chat with your accountant and possibly a lawyer to ensure that you are protected against any liability of that kind. So have a really good think about what you might be exposed to, and I strongly encourage you to seek out the advice of a professional. Then, of course, we've got tax efficiency purposes. I'm not an accountant. I'm not going to try and go into this. I'm out of my depth, but I know for a fact, with my wife being an accountant, that there are some really simple little things you can do to structure your business that will sweeten the deal from a taxation perspective. All right. You'll find a lot of Western societies are actually set up quite nicely for business owners so that you can take a chance and enjoy some tax benefits as a reward for doing so, as a reward for taking risk. We do that quite well in Western society. We tend to structure ourselves in a way that rewards the entrepreneur, that rewards the business owner, so that people can be encouraged to have a go and see if they can get something to work. So talk with a good accountant. I'm not going to throw any shade towards people, at a big accountancy firms like H&R Block and all those sort of generic names, but I strongly suggest you seek out a very good accounting firm and you get more of a one-on-one personal experience, not just someone who's looking to tick and flick and get you through as many tax returns as possible before they move on to the next person. I want you to seek out someone who is a professional when it comes to things like structuring your business for tax efficiency purposes. You get what you pay for. That's what I'm saying. All right. So don't be stingy. Make sure if you're going to do this and you're going to really have a go at this business, make sure that you invest accordingly and you take it seriously. All right. Finally, ethical considerations. We've covered this in previous episodes. Your reputation is everything. So you need to operate in a way that encourages people to trust you. It's the most important aspect of the relationship between you and your clients, the quality of your work, the trustworthiness of your business. It's absolutely everything. The most important aspect of relationship building with your customers and the conducting of good business is to operate in an ethical fashion. So you need to be laser focused on this. You need to make sure that you win the trust of your clients and that you always follow through on your commitments. You always act in a fair and reasonable manner. You have to be honest in all your dealings with your customers. Absolutely crucial. All right, guys, so by way of summary, we covered contextual background and your value proposition. Why does your business exist? Who are you targeting? What's your value proposition? Then we talked about marketing and networking strategies. Okay, you've got a product, you've identified what you want to do, what you want to offer the market. What does your customer look like? What's their demographic? Are they male or female? What age group are they? Why would they need this? Is there a gap that needs to be filled? Or are there other businesses? Are there thousands of other businesses that are trying to address this exact need in your area? Have a good think about that. Then we got on to how you're going to network and market. And we talked about word of mouth, obviously, at the grassroots level, just talking one-on-one with people that you know and getting good at having a sales pitch handy and talking about your business at a one-to-one level. But then we also talked about taking it next level and going to things like trade shows, setting up stalls, making that investment in yourself and your business to reach a wider market. And that's in the networking phase. Then we talked about marketing online. Probably a necessity in this day and age. I think Instagram and social media sites are probably some of the greatest marketing tools ever created. So you're probably going to have to get good at content creation. Then we talked about the different levels of service that we can offer. Are you going to tier it? Are you going to offer 3 products or 15? And streamlining your service offering so that you make what people want. Right? The 80-20 rule. 20% of your products will generate 80% of your revenue. So once you've worked out what that looks like and what the people want, cut the rest. And prioritize what the market's telling you. Then we talked about systems, processes, and templates. Maybe you need to get your hands on some really good accounting software, invoicing software like Zoho. Maybe you need to make sure that you've got, more expensive tools, sure, but ones that ultimately pay for themselves because they save you time. Maybe you need to have a look at the way that your production line, so to speak, even if it's in your shed or in your garage, maybe you need to look at the way that it's structured. Is it optimized for efficiency? Is everything within easy reach? Or are you digging through toolboxes to find what you need at the very bottom under a pile of tools? And then we finally covered off financial and legal considerations. Get yourself a good accountant. Talk to a lawyer. And then ethical considerations. Always operate from a place of trust and reliability. All right, that was a lot of information. You might need to have several listens to that one. I hope you've got your pen and notepad handy. And I do encourage you to get yourself an Excel spreadsheet started with all of these considerations written down. All right. And make sure that you approach this eyes wide open. And I can assure you that even if you do all this stuff, it's still going to be really, really hard work, but you will give yourself the very best chance of success. So that information that I just outlined there is how I would approach and how I have approached starting my own business. And I hope that if you follow those steps, you will be successful too. Guys, I hope you got something out of that. What I'll do is I'll direct your attention to the show notes as I always do. There is a link there. It says send us a text. Hit that link and you can essentially email the show. It's completely anonymous and private. You can list your name. You don't have to list your name, whatever. Let me know if you find this stuff helpful. Love that interaction with you guys. Talk to me about the challenges that you're facing in your leadership journey, or even just leave us an encouraging message showing us that you are enjoying the show. Also in the show notes is the link to our Instagram page and our LinkedIn pages. Jump on those if you would like to have some more interaction with the show. And finally, as I always do, hit the subscribe button on whatever podcast app you consume the show on. And if you're feeling really generous, leave us a nice 5-star review. But until the next one, guys, I'll see you later.